Good evening and welcome to London SWF 365. You know who I am now, so let's just get on with the proceedings. It's Eric Kripke night. We are so completely amped up about this. It's extraordinary. But before we get to that, The Thing, 8 o'clock this evening. We're going to be doing our Saturday night of the movies. Thomas G. Waits, who plays Windows in The Thing, is going to be joining us as we deep dive into the most extraordinary Carpenter classic, terrific script, amazing claustrophobic atmosphere and incredible characterization. It's just an extraordinary piece of work, not to mention the visual effects, which remain unparalleled to this date. We also have the caption competition, which we're going to be announcing just before The Thing, so dive in for that, see who is going to win a copy of Final Draft tonight. And just a reminder, The Thing, we are not going to be running on Facebook. So if you want to watch it live with us, you're going to have to do it on the website or on the app. And that is because the Eye of Sauron, aka Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook, is constantly watching us to see what we do, and they will kick us off Facebook. So watch on the app, watch on the Facebook, but we do have chat going in Facebook. So if you want to contribute to the conversation, hang out, which we all love doing on a Saturday night with a Saturday night movie, then that's the place to do it. So you can head over to the Facebook group and join in the conversation there. Just a reminder, do please ask questions tonight with Eric and make as many comments as you want, and we'll be putting some of those up on screen. If you can accept the Facebook StreamYard request at the top of the little window, or go to streamyard.com/Facebook, there you go, then we can see your lovely face alongside your comments as well. So that's it. That's me done. I think we should probably dive in with a trailer from the most recent season 2 of The Boys. Joe, let's watch the trailer.
Federal authorities have initiated a multi-state manhunt for William Butcher.
If anyone spots William Butcher or any of his known associates, Marvin Mill, Q Campbell, or this man, please call 1-888-0-CRIME.
The world still needs superheroes. So let's get out there. Let's take these cocksuckers down.
We are famous now.
Don't you worry. Daddy's home. I know we've been through some shit together. But this is a fucking mess. And we're the most wanted lads in the country.
So what's your big plan?
You'll love it.
I won't love it. I never love it. Never fucking love it.
Noted.
Ain't you twits lucky that I showed up?
Amazing. Now, even my other half, Lucia, who's not in the film business, is not really interested in film and TV, producing, writing, screenwriting, even she will turn to me at the right moment and say, fucking Diabolical. That's how much of a cultural impact this season, this series has had on people who love this kind of superhero stuff being pivoted into the dark side. So that's me done. I'm going to bring Savannah in. Savannah, are you there?
Yes, I am here, Chris. I am beside myself with excitement. So if my head explodes, don't worry, I died happy.
Fantastic. We should really have brought that clip in from Scanners for this, but there you go. Everything in retrospect. Now let's zoom over to Canada, I believe. Eric, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hey everybody. Hey guys.
Whereabouts are you?
I am on day 14 of my quarantine in Toronto.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well,
so
listen,
locked away.
I'm going to leave you in the incredibly capable hands of our own superhero, Savannah Morgan, and I will see you at the top of the hour. If we go a bit long tonight, then that's cool, and have a great time. I will see you at the other end.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thank you.
So thank you, and just a shout out to anybody that's watching this online and maybe a little confused because you're not one of our delegates. So the thing and things that are going to follow tonight, those are for LSF people, but you can be an LSF person too. If you there's even a special code on the page that you are watching this on. So don't worry if you're interested in screenwriting. This is an amazing festival. Our delegates, if you can find us on Facebook, they're really, really excited to be here. We're really excited to have them, and we're excited to have you joining us. And I'm really excited, as you can probably tell, to be joined by Eric Kripke, who is probably best known as the creator, screenwriter, showrunner, producer of Supernatural and The Boys. So Eric, thank you so much for joining us, because rumor has it from you, that's where the rumor came from, that production is about to start on season 3 of The Boys.
Yeah, we start shooting on Tuesday, so it is all happening. Yeah, crazy time.
That is fantastic. Okay, I'm going to kick things off with a question that all of our delegates will ask ad infinitum. How do we get into your writer's room? No, what are you looking for when you have somebody join your team? And I mean, obviously, with The Boys, it's often people that you've worked with before. It's executive producers from previous shows. So maybe, bring us back to like Supernatural when you were maybe a newer showrunner. But, what can we do to make ourselves prepared should we get the opportunity to join a writer's room?
That's a great question. I think the answer is it's a few things. I think what makes a writer's room different than the typical process of writing is it's an incredibly social experience. And that's what I like about it. I hate writing by myself now. I started that way, but now I hate it. So one is you have to sort of, be social and understand the flow of a room and know when to, fight for an idea and when to let it go and just kind of when to ride the energy of the room. I think the best way you run a room is it's sort of like the same rules of improvisation, which is it's never no, it's always yes and you want to keep it moving on a really positive clip. So, you have to be someone who can do that. But then on top of that, you also have to be really good on a page. There's probably too many producers in the television business who are just really charming in a room and then, really shit the bed on scripts. And so you really need like someone who's really good, excellent at both. But the one thing and then for me personally, you spend more time with these people than you do with your own families. So I have like a very strict no asshole policy. I will definitely check on someone's personality and do I think that we'll get along and have fun hanging out. There can be no drama, there can be no negativity, because it's just life's too short and a room is just a pressure cooker. So you just need good, relaxed, down to earth people.
Amazing, and congrats on your WGA nomination to you.
Oh, thank you. That's silly. That's if you look at that list, that's like Helen Mirren and Judi Dench, and then a porn star, and then Cate Blanchett, and it's just ridiculous that we're there. But we're very grateful.
It's ridiculous that the rest of everybody is there because The Boys is freaking cool. Okay, actually, I should mention I guess I should have mentioned this at the start. Like one of those disclaimers that I realize this is the middle of the day for some of you all. I'm not holding back on language on this interview, and we will be talking on some, sensitive subjects and things. So, I'll try and do a trigger warning before that, but just to let you guys know, this is probably maybe an SFW talk, maybe, unless you have a really cool job like being in the writer's room. So. Thank you all. Okay, my next question is on pitching. So going way back to Supernatural, you have mentioned before that your initial pitch was not accepted. They didn't just immediately say, yes, go and take your initial idea. So can you tell me mean, do you even have to pitch anymore? We'll go back to Supernatural, but do you have to pitch anymore, or are you just like, I'm Eric Kripke, and they go, right, untitled Eric Kripke project is on the docket?
Not at all. Like, not even a little bit. No, yes, of course I have to pitch. I have to pitch every new show. I have to pitch every episode of The Boys. I have to pitch everything. You know, I don't know what writer is at the level that they don't have to pitch anymore, but congrats to them. Yeah, no, you just it's, you know, it's a part of it. You have to sort of, that's a whole art to itself.
Perfect. So you were kind enough to share your original pitch for Supernatural online. So thank you, because I gobbled that down like a greedy screenwriter. And so I just want to put up the pitch document and just how did that differ from your original idea, and how did you, like, do you have any tips if you have to adapt your idea on the fly for anybody that's out there pitching their projects now?
Yeah, sure. The story that you're referencing is, you know, for years I wanted to make a show that was like Supernatural, and that it kind of investigated urban legends kind of along the highways and byways of America. But the version I came up with was, you know, a really, you know, cheap ripoff of Night Stalker. Ultimately, it was about this reporter, and he cruised around, you know, investigating for a tabloid newspaper. And I had a very, very elaborate pitch. I mean, I worked on it for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then finally came the time to take it into Warner Brothers, and I pitched it, and they were like, yeah, no, you know, we like the whole, you know, urban legend thing, but like reporter has been done, and yeah, so, you know, we're not into it, thanks. And, you know, I think maybe like a day before, 2 days before, I had written, you know, one way, just in like the margins of my notebook, you know, one way you could do this story would be like Route 66 style, like two guys in a muscle car. And that was literally all I had written. But you have to tap dance, you know, you have to be willing to think on your feet. And they said that they liked the folklore idea. They just didn't like the delivery mechanism. So I said, well, you know, I have a whole other one, which is, you know, two guys in a muscle car cruising around the country. And then literally on the spot, I was like, they're brothers. And, you know, they're just kind of cruising around Route 66 style. And, you know, Susan Rovner, who was the executive at Warner Brothers, leaned in and said, that's really interesting and unique, and there aren't a lot of brother relationships on TV right now, and tell us more about that. But I didn't have any more. So I said, well, all my notes are at home. So let me go home and get all my notes. We'll reschedule a meeting, and then I'll come in. And then like we rescheduled the meeting for 2 weeks from then, and I furiously wrote a new pitch, and that's the pitch that I put online. That's what pretty much became Supernatural.
Amazing. Okay, so with The Boys, how did that come about then? How did you have to, you know, because I know that you're a big fan of Garth Ennis's work.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Garth. That's where it kind of starts. He's, to my money, he's just the best comic book writer. You know, I think it's like him and Neil Gaiman are the two best. So I just devour everything he writes, and I read The Boys cover to cover for that reason. You know, heading into The Boys, I would say that my favorite thing that he's done was Preacher. And so when they announced that Preacher was going to be a TV show, I happened to know one of the producers, a guy named Ori Marmer, and I set a meeting with him, and you know, because we're friends, and I came in, and he's like, "Hey, man, what's up?" And you know, what's up? Why are we having this meeting? I said, "Oh, I just wanted to say fuck you for giving Preacher to somebody else, because I'm the world's biggest Preacher fan, and that's really all I wanted to say." And he said, "Well, you know, we're about to close the rights to The Boys. Do you want The Boys?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, totally. I'll take that. Great." And then that was mostly it. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg were kind of circling it around that same time to produce, and at the time they were going to direct the pilot. And so I met with them, and we all got along, and then from there, the three of us, me, Seth, and Evan, put a pitch together, and then started taking it around.
And what was so I was listening to an interview with Seth Rogen, and the core concept of this, I mean, because I feel like there's that parallel in the two brothers going around battling things that go bump in the night, and now, you know, here's this team of, you know, non-powered people going and battling the superheroes, and, you know, you really champion these everyman kind of projects. And Seth was saying, you know, the thing that's so great about The Boys is it's not about like putting on the magic glove or something. We're building a bigger and better thing, you know, and then having all the superheroes show up at one point. He's like, how do they know what point? Who's sending the text message to everybody to make them assemble?
Right, exactly.
So it's a great concept. I absolutely love it. Which kind of feeds into my next question, structure. So I am a massive Structure fan. I know that not everybody is. I devour everything I can find on Structure. And when you released, you had the draft of the pilot and various things for Supernatural. And it was such a classic hero's journey, classic Joseph Campbell. So, you know, I mean, I made a ridiculous like color wheel to map out the.
Whoa! Look at you.
There you go. That's
awesome.
That's enough, Joe. Put that.
You rule. That's great. No, that's
Joe,
awesome.
stop it. Okay. Yeah. So I was very, very into taking it all apart, and the thing that's so amazing to me about The Boys is that it's so multi-layered. There are multiple hero journeys going on. There are multiple protagonists. There's nothing nearly as kind of clear cut as that. So how has your, you know, when you're sitting down now, I mean, and in the beginning of Supernatural, the first season especially was very much Monster of the Week and very kind of formulaic. And it just, with streaming, everything has kind of shifted, and the pacing and everything. So gosh, this is a big question, but how do you tackle Structure now?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's way different for a lot of ways. I mean, you know, you write to your medium, and when I was writing Supernatural, it was on network television, and it was a slightly different era of, you know, much more episodic television. You know, and network TV has this structure that's like teaser in 5 acts. Supernatural's been around so long that when we started, it was teaser in 4 acts, and then they created another act because all the television executives decided they wanted to squeeze in another commercial break. And so teaser in 5 is highly structured, highly. It's almost a haiku of structure. You know, and because every act break needs to end with a cliffhanger, because it's designed to carry you over the commercial break. And so when you have teaser plus 5, you know, sometimes you only have 7 or 8 pages to build to a moment. And I actually enjoyed it for the challenge of the discipline. I also am a structuralist. I love structure. I think it's just fascinating. And how something that is ultimately about math creates an emotional reaction. Like using math to make someone cry is sort of a beautiful, you know, strange process, and I love that part of it. So Supernatural was very much that, and yes, I was and still am obsessed with Joseph Campbell, and just this idea of this monomyth that no matter what you plug into it, whether it's, you know, Star Wars most famously, but you know, E.T. and Wizard of Oz and Godfather and, you know, a million things, and you keep plugging in, you know, different things into that same structure, that it always works. That is a crazy notion. It's like a cheat code, and I was really interested in that. And so I was like, well, shit, if that works for everybody, then why don't I use it for my TV show? And then it worked again. So you know, if you're starting out and you're looking for something, man, and you're looking for a way to structure you have a cool world, and you're looking for a way to structure it, you could do a lot worse than looking at Campbell's structure, because it's amazing how much it triggers like a weird primordial little, you know, acorn in somebody's brain. There's something about it and what it means to the human experience, like back when we were cavemen. So that's a little commercial for Joseph Campbell. The Boys was totally different. So The Boys has no acts. The Boys has, we can go 45 minutes if we want. We can go, 65 minutes if we want. Whereas Supernatural had to be 42:20 every single time. And you can just kind of write whatever the hell you want. So I actually had the opposite problem with The Boys, which is there was no structure, there were no rules, and I like structure. I like knowing what my skeleton is and what I can hang on to. So that was definitely an adjustment. If you actually look in the first couple episodes of The Boys, it's actually highly structured because I think I was nervous and I needed a security blanket. It was based in many ways on The Wizard of Oz, where Huey was Dorothy in that model, and he was kind of blown into this new world. And as he's kind of heading down this, yellow brick road to hell, the first ally he finds is Butcher, or finds him, and then finds Frenchie in the next episode, and then Mother's Milk in the next episode, and finally Kamiko in the fourth episode. And so it bought me, I just needed a little bit of time it bought me enough structure that I could kind of get my head around exactly what this show is and what the tone is, as Huey is sort of finding these allies. And it's almost all completely through Huey's perspective. And then finally, once the team is kind of all together, I started to understand, and when I say I did, it's really my writing staff. I mean, you rely so much on, your team. We all started to understand enough of what the characters were that it let us finally start to open up into the ensemble that it now is. And I would say now what we do, I have the absolute exact opposite problem that I had on Supernatural, which is I had two characters who were in everything, and it was almost impossible to cut away to something else. And that's why we came up with, Castiel, and that's why, the later the show went, the more and more supporting characters showed up. And honestly, it began with an idea that we were killing Jared and Jensen, and the production notion of we just simply needed to be able to cut away to somebody else. And I have the opposite problem on The Boys, which is I have too many people and I have too many stories, and it's hard to juggle it all. It's too much good stuff. So right now, the process that we do for The Boys is, I call it's sort of like short story filmmaking. We have, usually Butcher drives in a story, or Butcher and Huey, or sometimes Butcher and Homelander. And they get maybe 7 or 8, maybe 9 beats of a story. And then you look for okay, then who's the B story that gets maybe 6 beats of a story? And then who are the other characters that we have to service and move forward? And maybe they get 3 or 4 beats. And we usually have 5 or 6 stories per episode that we keep separate for a crazy long time, weeks. These stories are just their own little short story of The Deep, has got this going on with the Church of the Collective, and he's got this story, and Starlight's got this going on, and we keep them all, they just live in this book of The Boys' short stories. And then one of the very last things we do is we call it, some people in the room call it the weave. I think that sounds too like Lord of the Rings or some sort of weird, or Crawl, too much of a fantasy thing. So I like to call it shuffling the deck. So we shuffle the deck, and then we finally put everything together, and certain connections will emerge and certain conflicts will emerge. Oh, wait, once you put those 2 beats together, it doesn't make sense. And then you have to recreate and re-break a little bit to smooth it all together. But so if you actually look at an episode of The Boys, it's probably much more similar to big ensemble shows honestly, the closest, obviously, although they're way classier than us, but the closest was Game of Thrones in terms of how many different characters to service and how many story threads, you're following. And, that's been working for us. So, that's certainly, a big part of what season 3 will be.
Perfect answer. Thank you very, very much. And I get to digest that when I'm not panicking about being the interviewer at the same time. So
you're doing great. You're doing awesome.
Go back and thank you. Which brings me to my next question, which is on characters, obviously, because that is the root of everything in both Supernatural and in The Boys. And Michal Aviram is an amazing writer in her own right. She's a writer on Netflix's Fauda, and she created Orpheus Project. And she and I have been, I just have to quote her because she just, when she realized I was doing this, she said, "Oh my God, The Boys is just fucking fantastic." And then, so she and I have been geeking out, and I said, "Come on, I need help with questions." And she said, "Look, I want to know how," she's a screenwriting instructor as well. And she said, "How does he create this authentic conflict? Because all of your characters are so well defined in terms of their dialogue, their interests, their backstory. And with Supernatural, maybe a little easier because they're, it's two brothers and they're kind of diametrically opposed. But with The Boys, everybody's just like weird shades of gray, and yet all of this creates this conflict that just drives every moment and like supercharges these moments." So I don't know. I mean, when you create characters, how do you do that? What's your process?
These are great questions. They're way fun. It depends. Obviously, there's no one good rule. On The Boys specifically, I can talk to, I do, again, I like to use structure. I like a process. I'm too anal to just kind of feel my way through it. So and in The Boys, there's sort of two different processes. There's how we sort of break the heroes and the superheroes, and how we break the boys or human characters. And the way we break the superheroes is unique. I've never done it on other shows. It's obviously very specific to this, which is the gimmick of the show, really, the core compass of the show is, what if superheroes were actually real in our world and had to suffer all the psychological truths and minor indignities that real people do because they're living in our world? And once you apply that sort of stringent level of logic to what is inherently an illogical concept, magical gods flying around, it actually tells you a lot of who they are in a deconstructionist kind of way. It's easy to get to Homelander as this snake's nest of sociopathic issues because he sees himself so above, Superman sees himself as so above humanity, but this guy, Homelander, still shits and still has mommy issues and still needs love, but hates that part of him. And once we sort of got to that, then we were like, oh, what a mess, that character is. A-Train, once we started realizing it's hard to be the fastest man alive. It's hard to have a power that's performance-based because there's got to be other people that are gunning for you. And so you would be very insecure. You'd be a very insecure professional athlete. And so that was where his power came from, and his character. Deep was about just what a stupid power it is to talk to fish, and how inadequate he would feel inside, and then what that would make him do on the outside. So he was sort of he kind of became like the pretty boy who wanted to be taken seriously. And so that just kind of just applying, radically disciplined logic, to where I don't like the idea of, oh, this person's a good guy and this person's a bad guy. I don't understand it, because no one looks in the mirror in the morning and is like, you know what, I'm evil and I'm going to do evil things. Like, every single person is the hero of their own story. They think they're saving the world. They think they're doing the right thing or trying their best to be good, even if they're horrible. And so I need to understand always, well, what are they thinking and why do they do that? So that's them. For the boys or human characters, because this is probably more useful to your audience because they can bring this into their own work. Obviously, so much of screenwriting is creating the illusion of reality, because obviously it's not reality. It's words on a page. It's filmmakers on a set, but you have to make it feel real. And so how do you do that? And I have found that what works for me is when I come up with a character, based on, the confines of the story, I like to think of characters as a yin and a yang. There's a light and a dark part of them. And it's obviously real humans have 50 of them, but for a screenplay, it's usually, for me, is what works for me, is you define what one of them is. For Huey, for instance, in season 1, it was his desire for revenge versus his desire to move on and have love with Starlight. That was his yin and his yang. And once you define what those two things are, then you can swing a pendulum back and forth as from a character, and then have, it's not really complexity, actually, it's the illusion of complexity, because you know what those two bits are. And so sometimes he was with Starlight, he's really falling for her, and then he's reminded that, oh wait, I'm supposed to go get revenge. And back and forth he swings. And if you look at all of them, they all have versions of that. Butcher is bloody vengeance at all costs, versus care for this de facto family he's created for himself. And so sure enough, he swings back and forth on that until the very end of season 1, where he decides he's going to sell his family out and go get revenge on Homelander no matter what, and it blows up in his face. So to me, it's about, if you can know what those two things are, if you can know what blank versus blank is in a character's inner conflict, that's really a great guidepost to just know, well, where are they in this scene? And at the head of this scene, oh, he's in love, but then the scene turns because Butcher shows up, and so now he can't be. And it really helps in a million ways, just get your head around what a scene needs to be, and then you're always tracking in every scene, well, where are they on the spectrum between those two poles? So that, to me, again, it's just math, right? It's just structure and math, but it ends up creating a character that feels very human.
For what it's worth, you're wrong. I actually do wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to be evil today because I'm evil and do evil things.
I'm just going to kill some people and just be evil and take over the world.
Yes, absolutely. I just haven't made it yet, but I'm working on it. So stay tuned. Which actually brings me to my friend Vera's question I was going to ask at the end, but it segues in. So you have these ridiculous situations, but you manage to ground them. I mean, how far is too far? Especially as you're also the producer, you're the showrunner. You can kind of does anybody just tell you no, or can you just do whatever you want until you run out of money?
They used to tell me no a lot more than they do. By the way, no's healthy. No, I'm nervous of being in a position where, that's where you get into all due respect, that's where you get into late stage George Lucas. You need people to challenge you and say no. They would say no a lot more in the beginning, and I would fight for things. I would fight hard. For instance, the powers that be in season 1, did not want to do that dolphin, did not get it, did not understand it. It was too expensive, and we needed a robot dolphin. And I fought for it. And then, they didn't like that it implied a sexual relationship between Deep and the dolphin. And I fought and I fought and I fought and I fought. And obviously once it became one of the big memorable moments, I think from that point forward, it was a little easier to get things through. But to your first question, which is an interesting one, which is like, is there such a thing as too far, and how do you keep things grounded? That's really interesting. I mean, to me, both in this show and genre in general, to me, the best way to make accessible genre is to embrace it as a metaphor for the human condition, and to make sure you're always completely grounding it as much as you possibly can in a real emotion that a person would have. You know, Rod Serling is the gold standard of this, but that's what makes genre great, is not the, you know, spaceships, and, you know, we have the term in the writers' room of like, yeah, we'll see you at the convention, which means it's all flash, but it doesn't have the substance of a human story underneath it that could be accessible to anybody. And that's what we're always going for. So, you know, and I think it does make it more accessible and interesting. You know, like The Boys is about politics and celebrities and pressure and your mother and your father doesn't believe in you, and, you know, and you're desperately mourning the loss of a loved one, you know. So it's always finding what are those things that just pull it down to something that the audience really understands and says, I feel that way too. No matter how crazy or insane that character is. And if you can pull all that down, you can get away with some crazy, crazy fucking shit. You know, I mean, I don't think we do things just to do them. I think you'd be surprised at just, you know, despite how insane The Boys is. I mean, I think you would be surprised at the discipline with which we sort of attack the set pieces and the rules. But, you know, but what our internal rule is, you know, again, if you apply the most stringent reality to an insane thing, insane things will happen. But it can't just be like a flying saucer lands or whatever. It always has to be like, okay, if this really happened in our world and that someone really had that power, and someone had so much power to communicate with fish that they could ride on the back of a whale and they could, you know, try to block your escape with that whale, like, what would you do? Well, you would drive a boat fast and you would smash into the whale because it's a giant fleshy thing. It's those types of conversations that lead to madness, but ultimately it's, you know, to me, what is like a really fascinating tension of once the real world butts into this entirely insane superhero universe, the sparks that are thrown off from that are just so ridiculous that you can have a lot of fun. I will say, and I won't say what it is, but once the season, you know, premieres, whenever that is, we're working on a thing right now that is the craziest thing, not just the craziest thing I've ever done, but I think it's going to be the craziest thing anyone's ever done. It's so crazy. Like, it's just, every time we're working on it, I'm just like, oh my God, it's so crazy. But it's based in a reality of, if you were a superhero and you really had powers, what would you do with them?
Well, if you need any, you know, eyes on the editing, or, you know, you get stuck on the ideas, right? We're right here for you.
It definitely leaves the whale behind in a substantial way. So I will.
This is way too much intrigue.
Yeah.
I can't take it.
Crazy.
So I just want to give a kind of trigger warning out there to everyone, because that is like the perfect place, because The Boys is kind of in some ways as much of a superhero show as like Animal Farm is about a bunch of animals, right? I mean, I feel that genre TV has such an amazing, and genre films, such an amazing way of exploring topics that don't necessarily, like, you can get away with exploring topics that people don't even realize that they're being asked to think differently about these things, because they don't see it in terms of what's on the news. You know, but it presents this different way of looking at something. And I just want to say that, you know, I want to talk about the girls in The Boys,
Yeah,
because for me, this has been a revelation, and I want to talk about the pilot. So, trigger warning to anybody. Okay. So the pilot, I was like, okay, this is cool. I mean, I'm sorry for Huey. His girlfriend gets, blown to smithereens, and, that sucks, but I'm like, I'm in it, and okay, that's cool. Along for the ride. And then we get to Starlight. I'm like, okay, I'll give her a chance. We'll see where she's going, And then you get to the deep, and he's being all charming, and I'm like, wow, okay, so maybe there's a love interest. And then there's that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I was totally shocked.
Mm-hmm.
Shocked to see it in any show, much less a superhero show. And it was so, so powerful.
Mm.
So first of all, thank you for putting that in there. And like, I was reading like an earlier draft of the pilot, and that scene wasn't in there. Like the Deep was kind of a different character. He was kind of more aggressive, more it was just different, and it didn't, that whatever the original scene was, it just didn't have the same kind of impact I felt. And then what you came out with in the pilot was just mind blowing. So, how was that conversation with your team? And how would you encourage us to, because honestly, I would have been afraid to write that. Even as a woman, I would have been afraid to write that into something of mine. I would have been afraid to go out into the online community with that. And like, this is going to be a terrible pun, guys, but you dove in the deep end with that. And, so just talk me through like the generation of that.
Yeah. I'll get to why you read a different draft in a little bit, which is a story about, how, the business in a way that I find interesting and a little lame. But the story of that scene, it probably was in the. Sorry, there's a siren outside my. Everything's okay in Toronto, just FYI. But I would say the discussion of that scene was probably the very, very first discussion I ever had about the boys. That scene is a version of that scene is a very famous scene in the books as Starlight's kind of introduction into the Seven. That's in the books. But whereas Garth. I think played it for shock value. I was interested in, okay, well, let's explore, if we're really going to do it, how do we really do this? Because we obviously cannot do it for shock value. And I agree with you. I have to tell you, I was terrified. And my first instinct in my very first conversation, it was with Michaela Starr, who is one of the co-EPs on the show and has worked with me since Revolution. And it was Ann Saunders, who worked with me on Revolution and Timeless, and she was an executive producer on The Boys. And it was the three of us in the very beginning. And I said, what if, he does it and he pulls his pants down and then she blasts him and she gets out of the room, and because I was scared of it. And I also want to point out that in terms of the timeline, we were developing this for a while before it got made. So this was before Me Too. And this was before it became like a really a public conversation. And Anne and Michaela both said, no, she needs to do it. And you need to live with the implications and the consequences of all of it. Because so many people we know have been cornered into that position. And sometimes that's the only safe way to get out of that corner. And I was like, wait, what? Like, because I was just completely admit, stupid fucking, oblivious white guy asshole. And I was like, wait, what? And so I started taking a poll of all the women who I had worked with and knew, and the amount of people who had to deal with this was just overwhelmingly stunning and horrific. And one of the regrets of my life to the rest of my life is that, I was a showrunner for a certain amount of years, oblivious to that. And I will regret that forever, that kind of shit was going on. I mean, never on my shows and never around me, but still, like, we all have to take responsibility for that shit was out there and I didn't see it. And I'm sorry for that. But then that, motivated all of us as a team of like, okay, we're going to do this. And I feel like we had to. But I was really scared of it, and it was really important to me to get it right. So, my approach to it, because I happen to be, the asshole writing the script, writing something that had, nothing to do with my like white guy experience, but I wanted to get right. I had a lot of conversations with a lot of women, some of which were very painful. And I did my absolute best to get the fuck out of the way and just like let them speak and not try to steer it one way or another and just take it. And then ultimately kind of, boil it down to, Starlight's experience, both in that moment and then in the aftermath of that moment. And then when it came time to like loop in Aaron and then Chase, we went through that process all over again, because then the actors actually have to live it and play it. And so I'll say this, I've never worked so hard or stressed so much about a scene in my life before or since, because if I got that wrong, it's not just that it would fail as a scene, it would be hurtful. And I felt that pressure and responsibility all throughout. So then we were in the middle, just as a little side note of just, when you're working on a show that weirdly is as current as The Boys is, this tends to happen, which is we were in the middle of, they had us write most of the scripts before we started producing. And we were in the middle of breaking season 1 when the Me Too movement happened. And the world changed underneath us. And so we actually had to go back and re-break Starlight's through line to reflect how the world had changed, because in the original storyline, the women who were, on my staff were like, in the beginning, we were like, well, who does she tell about this? What does she do about this? And the discussion was there's not going to be many people she can turn to. So she has to figure out how to deal with it just with the deep one-on-one. And we were heading that way into a story. And then suddenly, thank God, like way to the better, like women could talk about it and they could say it and they could call people out. And so we had to go back and we had to say, oh God, she has now this amazing tool and she has to use it, where she could be at the Believe Festival and she can really speak out, which Anne wrote that episode. So that was kind of how all that evolved. I'll say, without getting into like too much detail, but the reason you read a draft that didn't have it wasn't because it wasn't there. It was because corporations, without going into so much detail, and Amazon and Sony have been nothing but great and supportive, and so it's not necessarily about them. I'm not naming anyone specifically, is my point, but there were corporations that were really scared of that scene too, and I sort of needed to create a dummy draft to get certain things we needed for the show, and that draft somehow got widely circulated, but I never had any intention of using that scene. That was just a scene to keep certain, gray-haired people comfortable while we were off, shooting the real version.
Well, on behalf of the other viewers like me, I'm really, really glad that you fought for that scene, and it meant a lot. And like, that was really the thing that turned me into a rabid fan of the show, and changed it from like, yes, this is really exciting and everything, to just like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's amazing.
And on that, I also have to bring up the next amazing moment, which for me was the girls get it done. So I've seen some other interviews where you've talked about it was Rebecca, I think Sonnenschein.
Yeah.
Yes. So she was kind of the impetus for that moment.
Yeah.
And for anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, there's this amazing scene in The Boys when all the girls get together and just kick the shit out of this Nazi bitch. Yes.
Yeah.
And everybody online was drawing comparisons to the Avengers A-Force scene where all the girls at the Avengers band together. And look, I'm an Avengers fan. I am. I love the banter.
Totally. Me too.
I'm like, yes, it's really exciting. And I still was really pissed off at that. I'm like, great. So now we're reduced to being girls. That's it. Because there was like no connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Tell us about making that scene, and also when you kind of thought that it might be an idea, because you were talking about everybody has these little short stories and then you kind of weave them together. And that was the thing. They were all interwoven. They were all there for a reason. They all had their own goals and purpose and everything. And that's what made it really like live for me.
Yeah. I'll have a light touch about the Avenger movie, because the amount of online shit I caught after talking shit about that. Because here's the truth, and I'm not saying this because of the tsunami of shit that I caught, but the truth is, like, I'm an Avengers fan. I'm a Marvel fan. I obsessively watch all of those movies. I actually love them. I think they're really well done, and they're funny and well written and amazing, impeccably produced. And I love that movie too. It did feel a little overt, I would say, to bring all of the women together, because they wouldn't have normally come together in that battle. They just kind of had to come together, But I know a lot of women were thrilled, by it and seeing it, and more power to them. I think we were just sort of commenting on, Rebecca came in and she was kind of like, ugh, like it was, that scene was pretty gratuitous. And to me, the thing that I reacted to the most ultimately is, and both found it funny in a satirical way, is like how corporations will do supposedly liberal things, but do them in pretty clumsy, overt ways, mostly because they want to sell more product. I don't know if there was a lot of discussion amongst the Disney Corporation about truly being proactive and in feminism. I think it was probably like, yeah, we'll get some people to cheer, and they'll cheer, and that'll be great, and then they'll have that, and that to me is amusing and worthy of satire. The sort of performative wokeness thing. But I also acknowledge that it really did mean something to a lot of people. So I get that. Mileage varies, but for me, I felt the cynicism behind it, I guess is what I'm saying, a little bit. I'm going to get in trouble for this one too. I can't avoid this. So that was part of the discussion of like, could we do a version? And that was where, Rebecca came up with, there's a through line in the season of like, girls get it done, like girl power. And could you repeat that, but say strong is the new pretty in the middle? And it's just this notion of packaging feminism into like an easily digestible commodity that then you can use to sell more shit. And that was sort of the joke of, that corporations are just using this to ultimately, sell more widgets. And so we were interested in, by the time we got to the end of that, season, we were really interested in, like, what would it look like to have a completely unvarnished, unpolished moment of, female empowerment that is completely unpackaged. And what would that look like? And that's why we landed on, like, it's Starlight saying, like, "Eat shit, you Nazi bitch," and just like they would be furious. It would be a curb stomping that, we had all of this looping that, we had in there of, like, we just encouraged them to, like, just shriek and be fucking angry and use as much profanity as you feel like using, because it's like, they're human beings that are expressing anger, not sort of like, like cute empowerment because it'll let them, because it sells posters. So that was kind of where that came from, and I think a lot of people got that from it, which I appreciate. But it's not shitting on Marvel, please. I'm gonna walk out of Marvel and get run over by a van that's got Marvel on the side. I don't need any of that static.
I'm sorry. We love Marvel. We love the Avengers. And if anybody has hate, direct it towards me, because I did say it was my opinion that I was frustrated with the A-Force moment. So thank you for that. Look, I'm aware that I'm, like, taking up all the time and I'm not going to our audience at all. And too bad, because I'm evil, as I stated before. But I want to go to, now I've lost my train of thought. That'll teach me Herogasm. And well, actually, before I go to Herogasm, I want it leads off of the topic of adapting a comic book and where you feel that you have license to go. What, how much do you work with Garth Ennis in what you're doing? You turn Stormfront into a woman, which I think is amazing, and makes her such the perfect villain, to the perfect antithesis to Homelander. So yeah, let's talk about, because you tweeted out that, okay, you are adapting this Herogasm scene. Now, I haven't read the comics. Sorry. Yeah. So talk us through that process of like where you feel that you can make these changes and where you kind of have to stick to canon.
Yeah, no, look, they're different mediums, and the Boys comic is its own animal, and everyone should read it. It's good and shocking and political, but it's a different thing than our thing. Our thing is weirdly my and my team's interpretation of a thing, and then also all the issues and things that filter through us. So they're different is one thing to keep in mind. The Boys as a comic is actually pretty episodic. I always said it would really work well on an X-rated version of CBS. It's, they tackle different superheroes one after another, almost like a cop show. I think Garth was inspired a little bit by some of that structure. Whereas, on Amazon, we have to be serialized. And so we needed a big, long story, which in general, The Boys does not have. So each season we tend to come up with a mythology that is, probably different than what would be in The Boys. But then we try to design it to plug in all the moments from The Boys that we love. And so that, we can have some of those, the airplane hijacking. It's hard to say you love that moment. It's a horrific moment, but it always really stuck with me, and I really wanted to get it in. And so we got it in season 1, and then there's other moments that are, throughout, and there's quite a few coming in season 3, including Herogasm, which is, this massive hero orgy. And we're doing it it's in a different way, in a different context. But it's still there. That one was a little, sometimes we're just people. So we're just mischievous. And every single person who ever knew the boys, who knew that I was doing it, the first words out of their mouth would be like, I dare you to do Herogasm. That probably is the main reason I'm doing it. Like, I don't know if I'm doing it. I don't know if I have a great reason outside of everyone kept daring me. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to do it then. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, see right there. Everyone and Jessica did such a beautiful job writing it. I have no idea how we're going to film it. It's so insane, but we're doing that. So they have to be really different in their stories. I think Garth has been really great in terms of understanding that. I mean, we definitely worked, in the beginning, just as we're establishing things, he was definitely weighing in, a lot then. But funny enough, and he still weighs in. I mean, I send him every production draft, and from the beginning, he always said to me, just get Butcher right. Get his attitude right, get his tone right. You do that, and I'll be okay. And that was what was important to him, was Butcher. So, to this day, I send him drafts, and he sends me back, dialogue pitches for Butcher. He's really interested in getting Butcher's language right and his attitude right, and I'll take him. I am not from where you guys are from, and so I don't have, to me, knowing like the East End vernacular is not something that comes natural to me. So I think Garth does have an ear for it. He's not from London, but I think he has an ear for it anyway, just from his love of the character. So he'll weigh in on that. And and we'll see what happens on Herogasm. What's crazy about Herogasm is, so it's an orgy. I mean, it's an orgy. And so now that we're doing it, and we're doing it in like the COVID year, where once you call cut, everyone's got to put on masks and socially distance. And then when they call action, everyone's got to be like naked and together, and they're all superheroes. So like the amount of like craziness and fluids that are flying everywhere, I'm a little stunned how I'm a little bewildered how we're going to pull that off, but that's part of the fun of working on the boys.
Very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And you also had a spin-off show commissioned, yes?
Yeah. Craig Rosenberg, who is one of our executive producers, is doing it. It takes place at a Vought-run college where the young heroes are sort of trained before they head into the draft, which is other cities like draft for them. So it's kind of like it's kind of like a college athlete show meets Fame, meets Hunger Games. It's cynical and sex and drugs and, usual stuff. But it's I've been seeing some of the early stories, and it's really, really fucking good.
That was a good pitch. I'll sign off on it. Well done. Sure. Yeah. So I am aware that I'm totally monopolizing the conversation. So Chris, do we have any audience questions? Mel Evans, any advice for someone trying to write an original superhero spec in a world of IP and franchises? Nice question.
That is an excellent question, Mel. Just work on making the story great, and make your world interesting, and the characters are deep. Let it be grounded. Let it be something, that again is a sharp metaphor for the human condition, or has some spin or angle on it no one has seen before. It's obviously a very crowded space, and especially if you don't have IP, the best way to stand out is just by doing something really unique. It's, by the way, not the worst idea in the world to put together, figure out how comic books pitch and put together one comic book pitch that you could take out, because, maybe you'll get a comic book house to make it, and then you do have IP that you control. But mostly it's just about, if you're going to get into that space, you just have to do something or have an angle that no one's seen before.
Emily Isaacs, do you enjoy adaptation or working from an original stuff more?
1,000% original stuff. Like I went into these adaptations like thinking like, finally, like I don't have to think up all my shit and this is going to be great. All I got to do is take their shit and rewrite it. And it is so much harder. It's so much harder because, you know, you're adapting it because you love it, but you have to change it when you're adapting it. So you're really living a very real risk that you are going to be the person who destroys the thing that you love most to the world, you know, which is not fun pressure. So, you know, I would liken it to playing an incredibly stressful game of Jenga because it has to change. And so with each piece you agonize over, like, is this the thing that's going to make it topple over and make everybody hate it and hate me? And you like live with that pressure versus original, which is just, it's just wide area. You can stomp anywhere you want and no one cares. It's yours. So I have found it, you know, like way more stressful.
We have another one. I'm currently reading and watching The Boys and another Out There series as research for my disabled space soldier characters. Is there such a thing as too edgy or offensive?
Yes, yeah, there definitely is a thing as too edgy or offensive. You can easily get too edgy or offensive. You know, obviously it depends on who you are and what your personality is and what your material is. My experience, it was actually heading into The Boys. It was advice from Seth Rogen, actually, who, you know, is no stranger to stuff that's like a little, you know, a little edgy and a little out there. And, you know, what he said was, as long as the audience knows that your heart is in the right place, if you can communicate where your heart is, they will put up with a lot. And so I would say, like, if it has a good heart and everyone knows it, you can get away with really crazy shit. The other thing, and it's a George Carlin thought, not mine, but you know, the point of satire and brutal satire and edgy and offensive things is to punch up, not down. You want to bring down people in power that are above. You want to bring down authoritarianism. You want to punch up at people who deserve to be taken down a notch. And as long as you're doing that, I think the audience tends to go with you. When you're punching down at people who don't have power, and at people who are vulnerable, and you try to make edgy jokes about that, those usually come off as really hateful and in poor taste, and frankly don't make the world a better place. I mean, the core of comedy is to rip down people more powerful than you. So if you're going to be out there and you're going to be on the edge, then, you know, make the world a better place and do that.
Amazing. So my friend Karen is posting in the chat, Karen Sheard, but I'm gonna actually steal her question that she wrote me earlier, because the supernatural fandom, in addition to being renowned across the internet for getting to every meme posting group, like whatever is posted, we can turn it into something. I say we, because I'm definitely with that group. They also say that the show has really helped them mentally. It's often credited with, you know, with being really great when you're in a difficult space or with mental health. Has that impacted how you've decided to tackle some of these subjects with The Boys? I mean, I even found with The Deep, with his Gil singing to him, I mean, as much as it was a funny moment, it was also weirdly, like, emotionally impactful.
Yeah, it was. Well, we took it seriously, right? You play it straight. So what is the?
So I mean, just mental health. Like when, like similar question to with when you're portraying the female characters, but you know, are you kind of cognizant of how you're weaving in these topics that to do with mental health?
I mean, in a way, probably not specifically, I mean, to speak about that, it's like one of the great honors of my life that, that Supernatural even helped one person, let alone the amount of people that it helped. Like I'm a Hollywood scumbag, and when I'm at the gates of heaven, I will argue, ultimately unsuccessfully, of all the good that Supernatural put into the world. Like that's my best shot. But so much of that has nothing to do with me. So much of that is, Jared Padalecki, who has been, really frank about, the mental health struggles he had and has, and Jensen and Misha, and how open-hearted everybody is, and in supporting the fandom and sort of accepting them. And Jared's Always Keep Fighting campaign, and just the notion that things will be hard. Life is hard, but family, however you define it, either by blood or not, family will be the thing that gets you through. And I think people have really responded to that, and it's helped them. And it's been the great honor for me that, Supernatural, which was a show about family, they became one of the first and still one of the strongest, online families. And that message of family takes care of each other really came true. And all of these people online, when, someone is struggling, there are people to gather around them and help them. And to me, that's the best you can do as a human being, which is take care of another one. And so, so to answer, long way around to answer your question. So I don't necessarily specifically think about like how, how someone who might be struggling might react to this, or what does this say necessarily about, any specific mental health issue. But what I do feel very deeply is this notion that family takes care of family. And that is something that, you can see everything I do ultimately is a story about the way the war is won is you take care of your brother in the foxhole. That's life. That's everything. And I think that sort of loyalty and care that people have for each other is that being the best thing in the world, period. Maybe is something that people respond to, but I'm just grateful that they do. I mean, it's humbling.
We are very sadly out of time here, so I'm going to ask if you could just give us your one piece of advice for writers, emerging writers. One piece of advice.
Oh shit, that's tough. Okay, just write. Here's the thing. This is more than a short thing, but it'll be reasonably quick. Writing is way more of a craft than it is an art. There is no such thing as the person who is the genius, magical person who can like come down and jam out some brilliant screenplay or any piece of writing. That's not true. There's no such thing as a genius in this business. There are only hard workers. And it's like carpentry. You learn structure, you learn character, you have learned how to put some of these things together through an incredible amount of trial and error, thousands of hours literally of just making mistakes and writing really shitty material. And then you slowly but surely get better. So keep at it, write as much as you can, and don't worry that your stuff sucks, because that's everybody's stuff. Just, focus and focus and focus, and take the years that it takes, to get to a place where you start to become, slightly better at this craft.
That is a fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us, and we wish you the best of luck on your production. So fun.
Thank you. These were great questions. This was really fun to do, so thank you.
Fantastic. That's me done. So everyone, if you're part of LSF, stay tuned for the thing. And otherwise, good luck, internet. Be kind to each other.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you, Savannah. What a fantastic hour and a bit. We've just stolen an extra 15 minutes. Good luck with the show the day after tomorrow, Eric. And I can't wait to see season 3. So that's the end of this interview with Eric. We're going to take a short 2-minute break now. And when we come back, we won't be on Facebook. So this feed is going to stop running on Facebook. We're going to go to The Thing Script to Screen Saturday night at the movies. So you have to watch on the app or on the website, but you can continue to chat in Facebook. There is a special, look for the poster for The Thing, you'll see it, and that's where you can continue the conversation and the chat. We will be back in literally 2 minutes. We will start the movie and we'll see you on the other side. So remember, on the app or on the website. Extraordinary. See you in 2 minutes.